human development has been defined as the process of enlarging human choices. It's a simple definition, but with powerful implications, because when we talk about enlarging human choices, there are two sides of it. One is enhancing human capabilities, and you try to enhance human capabilities by food, nutrition, health facilities, education, and so on and so forth. On the other side of it is human opportunities. You may have capabilities, but you also need opportunities to use those capabilities. And you enlarge these opportunities by employment, by participation, and that kind of thing. So in the ultimate analysis, human development is development of the people, for the people, and by the people. And when we talk about human development of the people, it basically means how you can enlarge the capabilities of people. And when we talk about development for the people, it means that the benefits of development should be translated into the lives of people. And development by the people is simple, that people should actively participate in the processes that shape their lives, and they should not be just mere recipients of development process. Coming back to your second question, whether the HDI is a complete measure of human development. No, it is not, because the HDI is basically a focused measure. We have taken 3 areas of human development: a long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living. And the HDI tries to measure the average achievement of a particular country in those 3 dimensions. The HDI as a focus measure must be supplemented and complemented with other human development indicators: under 5 mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, unemployment rate, rate of environmental degradation. So when you actually supplement a focus measure with what we call the breadth measure, you then have a comprehensive picture of human development. We often make the mistake of limiting human development only to the HDI. I think that's not correct. The whole notion of human development came into being in 1990 when particularly Asia and Africa were suffering from structural adjustment. Countries were asked to balance their budgets, but in that process the lives of people got unbalanced. And in the whole process, people were pushed away from the center of development. They were pushed to the periphery of development. So the notion of human development came into being to basically emphasize people-centered development. What does that mean? It means that we try to bring people to the center of development, not only as the beneficiary, but also as the active participant in the decision making. So that was the starting point of human development, making the point that we want development not only for development's sake, but we want development to improve the living conditions of people, to enhance their human well-being. So the first human development report back in 1990 talked about the concept, but it also talked about a measure. Why the measure was important? Because you may have analytical discussion on a particular concept, but unless you try to quantify it, it will not appeal neither to the policymakers nor to the advocates of development. So we were very much aware that the Human Development Index was an imperfect measure, but we also thought that it is not as blind as GDP per capita to the broader human well-being. So that was the beginning. Over the last 27 years, there have been about more than 25 reports, and the topics of the reports have varied from gender equality to human poverty, to conflict, to cultural identity, and so on and so forth. So we try to cover the kind of the themes which are very important for human well-being. At the same time, there have been lots of improvements, refinements in terms of measures, and we have added new composite index. We try to refine the measures for environment, for security, for participation. So I would say that the whole human development report is a kind of an entrepreneurial journey. And in that process, we have tried to follow a dynamic path where we try to constantly refine ourselves, not only in terms of methodology, but also in looking for new subjects, new themes which are relevant. Because you have to remember that the world in 1990 was quite different than the world in 2019. So the report has to be relevant. The report has to produce some cutting-edge work, and the report has to be taken seriously, not only by the global community, but by the people on the ground as well. I think there are three. One is that in the HDI itself, if you look at the knowledge dimension, you will see that in the earlier reports, adult literacy was there, but later on adult literacy was dropped, mainly because it's a stock variable, it does not change that much. We now have expected years of schooling and we have mean years of schooling. Expected years of schooling mean that the children who are at school right now, how many years of schooling they are expected to get. And the mean years of schooling is people who have already completed their education and everything, what is the average achievement for that. So that's a major shift in, for example, HDI, which makes it more dynamic. The second changes we have seen is not within the HDI, but having additional composite index. There has been gender development index, there has been gender empowerment measure, we also have this inequality adjusted HDI. Those are some of the innovations that we have made in the family of HDI so that you can have a more comprehensive measure of human development in a particular country. Thirdly, you have referred to MPI. The MPI is just the opposite of the mirror image of the HDI. MPI actually looks at the same dimensions of HDI, but tries to assess development from a deprivation perspective. So in that sense, HDI and MPI are complementary to each other. In future, I think there will be more work on innovating. For example, can we or should we integrate any indicator of environmental degradation in the HDI, or should we leave it separate? There will be innovations. Are there any kind of a cultural factors that should be taken in the composite index? I think those are some of the areas where there should be more research, more work. One of the things we are also struggling with, that when we talk about the gender equality, one aspect of is comparing women with men. But there are certain aspects in women's lives which are very particular or peculiar to them because they are women. The domestic violence, for example. So therefore, the absolute deprivation that women face in a society just because they are women need to be addressed also in terms of indicators and measurements. It looks at the basic dimensions of human development, and for example, certain aspects of human well-being is not covered there. I have talked about environmental degradation already. It does not cover such issues as, example, human security, which is very important in every society. It does not cover the aspects of participation and the measure of participation. Now, the fundamental question is, should we overburden the Human Development Index with those aspects, or should we have other measures to reflect those aspects? I think that is a research question, because we are also aware that if you put too many indicators in the Human Development Index, then it becomes overburdened with indicators, and sometimes it loses the predictive power. So maybe it's better to have other measures of, for example, participation, security, environmental degradation. So that's one point. Second point, I strongly believe that the whole question of voice and autonomy should be looked at both in the concept of human development as well as its measure. So far, the whole notion of capabilities is very much in terms of well-being. The HDI is also a measure of well-being. But can we have a better measure of voices of people, the whole question of autonomy, the whole question of political freedom? I think those are important questions that are coming up in Human Development Index. My final point is there are also countries which are in huge conflict. You take Syria, Afghanistan, or a number of African countries. I think the human development concept so far have not touched on the whole point. If there are shocks and vulnerabilities in terms of conflict, or it can be economic shocks, or it can be ethnic shocks in a particular country, how to deal with it? If the human development trajectory is thrown off, how to get back to there? And one fundamental question may be, should the countries in conflict be assessed exactly the same way where there is no conflict? I think that's a major issue, because a number of countries where there are conflict, human development simply means human survival. I mean, if you talk of Syria, the only human development question is, can I cross the Mediterranean and be in a safe place, or am I going to be losing my life on the Mediterranean? So that is a very fundamental human issue, and I think those issues also be part of, if not the mission, but of the concept. I think I know that Nepal is in the process of dealing with some of the challenges of federalism. I think there is a great scope for Human Development Index to be relevant of it. We all know, and that's true of Nepal also, that all the provinces, if I take provinces as the unit, all the provinces are not equally developed. There are provinces which are more advanced, there are provinces which are less advanced. The HDI, the moment we disaggregate it in terms of provinces, it will be a kind of a mirror to the policymakers as to which are the provinces which are most deprived, which are the provinces which are more developed. That would necessitate that more resources should be given to the provinces which are quote-unquote backward provinces. So therefore, I think if the Human Development Report comes up with this segregated HDI in terms of provinces, and then within the provinces in terms of local levels, that would indicate, or that would be a strong indication to the government for resource allocation. And that may accelerate the whole human development progress in this country. Second, I think what can be also be done, that if we disaggregate it in terms of different socioeconomic classes, very rich, poor, or in terms of ethnicity, that will also help the government to decide what kind of policies or what kind of strategies would be good. Now, one of the problems with the HDI in resource allocation is that what is the kind of the principle you follow? Do we give more resources where there is a more need? Do you give more resources to those who have been more successful? So I think it would be whether you try to give a prize to somebody, or do you try to give somebody who is in need. I think there has to be a balance, and there can be different formula that can be done in order to balance the need as well as the achievement. That's a challenge, but I think the disaggregated HDI can be a very strong and powerful instrument actually in terms of resource allocation, in terms of national planning as well as provincial planning, and we look forward to see those things happening in Nepal.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.